Hello, welcome to Other Perspectives. I'm Nancy Kaplan. I'm pleased to have with me tonight two board members of the Ann Arbor Public Art Commission. Cheryl Zuellig is a landscape architect, and she was appointed to the commission in 2009. Jeff Meyers is a media professional and joined the commission last year. I think I said you were an architecture. I think you're an architect. I'm sorry about that, Cheryl.
It's okay.
Okay, so just give us a little bit of snippet about yourselves so we have some idea for the background of the people who are on the commission as exemplified by the two of you. Cheryl, would you tell us just a little bit?
Sure. I'm a landscape architect. I've been practicing for 25 years, and I work for a company here in town and focus on designing spaces for people, whether they're parks or waterfronts. We do a fair amount of work with healthcare and new hospitals around the country. And actually, I'm on the Art Commission. One of the things that interested me about being on the Art Commission is in my work as a landscape architect, I've been involved in working with artists and getting pieces of art into public spaces. And so I know how important it is. It really adds a lot of vibrancy to a public space. I also know, as a professional, it's very challenging. It takes a long time. There's some financial issues, and so I thought I could use my experience, my professional experience, to help the commission champion that kind of art projects.
Wonderful, thank you. And Jeff?
I am the managing editor of Metromode and Concentrate, which are two online publications. I'm also the lead film critic for the Detroit Metro Times, which I know doesn't really qualify me for anything artistically. I moved to Ann Arbor about 7 years ago. My wife took a position at the university. I had moved here from Portland, Oregon, which has a very aggressive public art commission and program, and had lived in the Pacific Northwest for a little more than a decade. I'd always been involved in arts from the literary perspective or from theater. My background is not particularly in fine arts or visual arts. But coupled with kind of my wonkish nature, I tend to really be up on kind of progressive urban ideals and whatnot. I had written an essay advocating for the idea of public art, and from there I was basically invited to join the commission.
Well, I'm delighted to have you here. So let's take people in and give them some background about this commission. Before the commission for art, there was another, the Commission for Art in Public Places preceded this. And so I was wondering if you have an idea of why the change. Why did we go from CAP to this commission? Do you have an idea of why? Do you want to tell me, Cheryl, why you think?
Well, and I will say that both Jeff and I are relatively new commissioners, and so we were not around when CAP was started in 1998. But I do know that some of our commissioners now were there back in the day, and very passionate about the idea of public art, and really promoted it, and from a volunteer standpoint, did a lot of really neat things and encouraged a lot of art in the city. And I think that overall the intent was to try to increase that advocacy for public art in the city of Ann Arbor, and the ability to move to a percent for art ordinance and to have some financial support from the city really is helping us do that and helping us put more public art in the city.
Am I mistaken? And I have a vague memory that part of the reason CAP was formed was that occasionally there would be people who would come to the city and offer them art, and there was no process by which the city could accept it. And so the idea were that there were some people who were very interested in the idea of public art, and they would help the city kind of navigate how to do that, because theoretically you could.
Should we look at some of those things that came from CAP?
Sure.
The first one, how if you can bring up the first one, and you can tell us about this. This is the stoneware panels, which are on 4th and Washington parking structure. I think they're lovely. They're fine example.
And really really kind of add some interest to that corner and add some, liveliness to what would otherwise be a pretty dull and uninteresting part of both the streetscape and as you're going into the parking structure.
So they bring it to me a human element too. I mean, because it's something that you want to interact with.
Yeah, and I mean, compare that parking garage to literally any parking garage within 20 square miles of here, and it actually feels like it's integrated into the city. It feels like, I mean, parking garages are never particularly attractive structures, and so having that, I think, actually increases the aesthetics and the human component, and I think the impacts are a multitude.
Should we look at the next one, which I thought was really interesting? I didn't know that this mural dates to 1982, which I think is wonderful. I didn't know that it was had been there that long, and that's on Liberty. And I think that's quite famous. I think that most people recognize that, and once again, it's a softening of what otherwise would be just a blank wall on the street scene. And then finally, to look at Margaret Parker's Sun Dragon. And she is on the commission now, and my understanding is that the Sun Dragon is being repaired. Now it has to be repaired because some damage was done to it in repairing the building. But this is just by way of showing that things were happening before the percent for art went into effect. So what is the difference? Tell us now what the percent for art and the commission has brought that you didn't have before.
Do you want to start?
I think it has brought
funding,
a whole
obviously.
bunch of things. Funding, certainly, and a structure and a process to put public art, a more specific structure and process to encourage public art in the city. And so it's not just about the funding, it's also about the commission itself. It's about a lot of people at the city who work pretty hard to participate and be part of the task force. And the percent for art has really allowed us to connect with the city staff and bring their expertise and their project management skills into the implementing of public art projects.
And from, I think, from a bigger point of view, I think that even though those are lovely examples, there aren't a lot of them in Ann Arbor. Comparatively to pretty much every other community I've lived in, albeit I've lived in a lot larger communities, the chance of encountering public art in Ann Arbor are pretty limited. And I think part of what APAC, Ann Arbor Public Arts Commission, allows for is a greater appearance of public art in the public sphere. And I think there are many, many opportunities for that. The example I love to give when we talk about why I think public art is important is if you look at the small parking lot across from the library, the permeable surface parking lot, there is a single topiary that sits next to that parking lot. Most people, you would not necessarily know it if you didn't see it. It's kind of this haphazard thing that happened. And this is this is a block, this is an area that is dominated solely by parking. You have the parking lot next to the library, you have the parking lot across the street from the library, you have the 5-story parking lot across the street from that, you have the Paleo parking lot next to that, you have the DTE parking lot across from that. In a 3-block area, you have an entire area that's dedicated to cars with almost no consideration for human beings. And so you have this stray little topiary, and as an experiment, I sat there on a Sunday to see how many people stopped to look at this thing, and it was about 18 people. One took their picture with it. My kids like it. This, I think, is an incredible illustration of what public art can bring to a community. And
so let me interrupt you for a second, because in fact there are expectations in reading the ordinance that, and I'm just going to tick them off and then maybe you'll see how it fits in, that the improvement of the aesthetic quality of public spaces, and that's just what you were alluding to now, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Then it says provide cultural and recreational opportunities, and then contribute to local heritage,
Mm-hmm.
stimulate economic activity, and promote the general welfare of the community.
Mm-hmm.
So, how about economic activity? Can you answer that?
Sure, sure. Look at a city like Chicago. Take a look at Millennium Park.
Right.
Millennium Park was an investment of hundreds of millions of dollars into public art.
But are we really, I mean, we're not Chicago, and we have such a small population.
So
do
we
we have
shouldn't-
the draw, I'm asking.
I mean, I guess the question is, do you use that as a reason to exclude something that becomes an asset to your community? I actually don't, that argument doesn't make sense to me. I think anything that is if you can argue that a ballpark is a asset to your community, why can't you argue that a piece of public art is not an asset?
Okay.
If we believe that stimulating ourselves physically in our environment is important, such as parks or tennis courts or paddle boats at Gallup Park, then why can't it be argued that we can intellectually and creatively stimulate our population by creating public art and public sphere?
Okay, so I'm going to skip right to the controversy then. You know, there is a controversy, and I want to hear your side of it.
I don't know that I have a side in a controversy.
Or your perspective on it. This is other perspectives.